This is Proxy Countdown. Welcome to the big show for the week of May 19th, 2025, alongside my tag team partner, Matt Moscardi. I'm Damian Rollis on today's countdown. Tesla's best version of an independent director. One fewer O'Reilly at O'Reilly Automotive. A proxy cage match tie at Phillips 66. The trend of two-screen shareholders continues at large cap U.S. companies. And on the big vote, Matt dives absurdly deep into the Wall Street Journal's top 250 board directors. I'm looking forward to that, actually.
No, you're not.
Let's start with this week's top stories. Chipotle Chief Strategy Officer and former CFO Jack Hartung is joining the board of Tesla, where he will be greeted by his son-in-law, a non-executive salaried employee of Tesla since 2016, and Elon's brother Kimball, who served on Chipotle's board from 2013 to 2019. So it's the best version. That's the best version they have as independent.
He also...
It's pretty close.
He seems to be a guy that sort of the tech bros know and maybe bring along for stuff. He's on the board of a private company called ZocDoc.
Great name.
And that company was funded by Founders Funds, which is Peter Thiel's group, and Andreessen Horowitz guy sits on the
a trusted big brother.
You have to know they're not going to choose someone who is actually independent.
No.
That's highly unlikely.
They gave it a shot. They're pretty close. Here's a good one at small cap company Luminar Technologies. Following a code of business conduct and ethics inquiry by the audit committee, CEO and chair Austin Russell and director Jun Hong Hang immediately resigned. However, there's no other information. They just resigned. However, the former CEO will remain on the board and be available to the incoming CEO on transition and technology matters. So whatever happened in that meeting was so bad that he had to immediately resign from CEO, resign from the chair, but he's staying on the board. So
he's got to teach the incoming CEO how to do whatever he did to get his resignation.
Yes, but he will remain on the board and be available to the incoming CEO. So there's no suggestion that he's ever leaving the board.
It's one thing that it strikes me about this is it the audit committee's job to do the ethics inquiry? I thought, wouldn't that be a governance committee job, or is it always audit?
Well, often they are tasked with a kind of a code of conduct. Looking at the company's code of conduct. So
what does a governance committee do if not ethics and governance?
I think they just pick future directors.
It's
of the
just
board.
a code for nominating.
Yeah, because it's been wrapped under the umbrella of the nomination committee. So. Maybe they dust off the bylaws, the board's bylaws. Maybe they get
I think they use that to sit on so they can reach the upper shelves.
As a companion piece to my 2025 theory about the down to 2 women on the board, but nobody seems to care. That's what I've been tracking all proxy season. There are now several companies I'm noticing that are appointing male directors despite having only 2 women on the board. Now, I raise this because it was a long governance trend that at large cap companies we're going to see at least 3 women on the board, but I think with Trump 2.0 and this return to the so-called meritocracy, we're losing all
we're saying
that theory. Yeah.
That the at least 3 women on the board, like the body count version,
yes, the body count,
is the equivalent of roughly 30% of your large cap board,
yes.
right? Like an average board. So we're still well below parity of any kind,
of course,
despite the fact that 55% of college graduates and people getting graduate degrees are women.
Yes, 3 was the benchmark that was rightfully created about 20 years ago. I mean, it's been a long time now. And then the governance world just sort of stopped asking for things, except for us. We seem to be the ones that are constantly shouting into the wind. So here's to support that theory. Nutanix is comfortable with only 2 women as they replace retiring David Humphrey with Eric Brandt, With Eric, they now have 2 board members who were executives at Broadcom, a second director who also has experience being CFO, and a guy that already serves on 4 other publicly traded companies, so he understands how to schedule board meetings already. So he's good at this.
That's good. He's got Google Calendar.
Yeah. Likewise, at Corvo, Peter Feld joins a board with only 2 women, so Peter will represent the second director with experience at Marvel Technology. And at Live Nation Entertainment, Trump administration toady Richard Grinnell joins a 2-women board, because, I mean, what do women really know about entertainment, after all? Just this morning, Matt, the new Live Nation Entertainment director tweeted this. I kid you not. This was the actual tweet from the new Live Nation Entertainment director. Left-wing violence is out of control. From Palm Springs, California to Washington, D.C., leaders on the left must speak up now. We all must focus on this growing left-wing violence problem, end quote. What the hell is going on over there on the board at Live Nation
Entertainment? Didn't we just stop DEI in boards because of meritocracy and they should stay out of politics and social justice?
Yeah.
Well, the good news is Live Nation is a totalitarian board, right? Like no one has any real power on that board anyway. Also, I just learned that their top sales were, don't tell anybody, and it's a good thing they don't have any women on the board, but their top sales last year were from women.
Oh yeah, Ticketmaster, right? Taylor Swift, Beyonce?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that Beyonce and Taylor Swift are the 2 largest acts that Live Nation sold tickets for.
Well, miraculously, Matt, the new Live Nation Entertainment director, the toady from the Trump administration, is the acting president of the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, despite absolutely no background in anything resembling the arts. So there's just a great trend going on. I don't know.
Meritocracy, baby.
Yeah. 2 influential directors are stepping down from our database. First, at O'Reilly Automotive. They're losing Larry O'Reilly, consistent with the board's mandatory retirement age policy. I got to hand it to O'Reilly Automotive for actually adhering to their governance policies. Luckily for shareholders, they have a spare O'Reilly in the trunk, and that's Larry's brother, David O'Reilly. So they still have an O'Reilly over there, Matt. Don't worry about it. And at Paychex, here's a big one. Founder, former CEO and chair, and board member since the Carter administration, Thomas Golisano, and his 63% influence is stepping down. That's a lot of power up for grabs. That's at Paychex. 63% influence.
That is a lot. But I have a question about O'Reilly.
Yeah.
Is he going to wear the shirt in the board picture?
Well, the remaining O'Reilly, I would say, of course, yes. Why would he not do that?
I just want to be sure that there's consistency, because still to this day, if you go to the O'Reilly Automotive website and look at the board of directors, there are 2 directors who are not wearing the shirt. One is a woman, and it's the only black man who's wearing a suit. Those are the only 2 who are not wearing the blue O'Reilly shirt.
So if you happen to be listening from like the Financial Times or the Responsible Investor, this is the real type of stories you should be picking up on.
This is the real
That's what Matt's
data.
trying to say.
That's the data.
Finally, in executive pay news, Bath & Body Works has a new CEO, Daniel Heath, who will replace Gina Boswell. The total bill to shareholders is it's about $17 million. A golden hello of $5 million and a golden parachute of $12 million. So that's what it costs these days, I guess, to make a switch at the top. And at Omnicron Group, how about this one? This reminds me of the situation at United Healthcare. Chair and CEO John Wren is giving up his $1 million annual salary. He's now going to get $1 a year in order to get a massive pile of 4 million options without performance-based conditions. This means that if the company can just get back to its share price from about 6 months ago, the CEO will have stumbled into a $120 million equity package.
Look, we said this on our other podcast, Business Pants, on Tuesday. This is the trend. This is going to be the way executives get paid, I think, for the coming year, because they're challenging investors to vote no. and none of the votes are binding in the U.S. anyway.
You can still vote no, though.
But we are talking about creating a situation in which you are guaranteeing executives $100+ million in realized pay if they just get you back to the where they were in the last year. What kind of situation is that? There is that with no other performance.
Yeah,
that is fabulous if you're an executive, and real bad if you're actually an investor.
Let's move over to our proxy cage matches. We have two interesting stories this week. Phillips 66 and activist investor Elliott Investment Management each won 2 board seats at the company's annual meeting this week, capping probably the biggest proxy cage match of the season so far. The vote is significant because no activist at an S&P 500 company had successfully won a board seat in at least 15 years, according to the reporting, without support of one of the big 3 index funds, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. So while Elliott's campaign was backed by ISS, Glass Lewis, and Egan-Jones, the top 3 passive investors actually sided with the company. So they're calling this a sort of a big win for the proxy advisory system? I don't know.
I think it's a big sad face for the largest investors in companies in this country, isn't it? I mean,
no.
Everyone
no
agreed. Like, you don't have to perform well anymore as a company. And even if an activist comes in, BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard will not care. Like, I'm not sure that's the signal that you want to send the market.
The 2 Elliott nominees selected were Sigmund Cornelius and Michael Heim, while on the Phillips 66 side, Robert Pease was reelected and Harbor Energy's COO Nigel Hearn was added to the board, if anyone's keeping score. And finally, at Victoria's Secret, they adopted a poison pill, although will say, typically speaking, from the corporate governance perspective, we want these poison pills to be approved by shareholders, but that's not what's happening at Victoria's Secret. They're adopting a poison pill to block a potential takeover by Brett Blundy's firm, BBRC International. I've never heard of that. They're doing this unless all shareholders are fairly compensated for the takeover. Starting May 29th, shareholders will get rights that activate if anyone acquires 15% or more of the company, allowing them to buy shares at a discount and dilute BBRC's stake, which is currently about 13%, so they're getting close. After resolving past antitrust filing violations, BBRC is now allowed to increase its stake in Victoria's Secret to 49.99%. All that just to say, this is our first poison pill story we've had in a while, so I just wanted to share that.
It's also a very weird attempted takeover by Brett Blundy.
Who,
I don't know what his. First of all, why is it white men who keep on with the obsession of owning Victoria's Secret,
owning underwear,
and women's underwear in particular, and secondly, there is some speculation that he's buying it actually for his wife, who is a young woman who actually started her own fashion brand. So I'm not
there you go.
sure. I'm not sure what to think about this. Who am I rooting for? Brett Blundy or the poison pill?
Yeah, I like the name, Brett Blundy. I like that, Brett Blundy. Moving over to our vote results table. Here are the highlights from exactly 100 large cap annual meetings over the past week. I like when I have a number like 100 because I can understand the math a little bit better. Only 41 total shareholder proposals. These numbers are actually going down, Matt, because I've been tracking this every week, and from only 34 companies. So again, there's a big hysteria in the anti-woke, anti-ESG circles that shareholders are basically taking over the process. They're ruining capitalism. But really, I'm seeing nothing happening. There's really nothing going on. I mean, I'm barely seeing shareholder proposals anymore, let alone any victories. According to my math, a full 2/3 of all meetings had 0 shareholder proposals and 0 dissent. Like no big votes against pay, no big votes against directors. So just nothing. I'm calling this the the era of the two-screen shareholder. They're voting, but they're also watching, Parks and Rec on Netflix on their phones. They're kind of doing two things at once. You know,
it's
what I mean?
kind of a good choice, though.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Only 6 wins overall. We had 2. I call these wins, but we had 2 Say on Pay wins. One at Otis Worldwide, one at Simon Property Group. But Matt rightfully pointed out earlier in the show that these are non-binding votes. And the other one that always seems to be an easy dunk is the simple majority vote. This is the John Chevedden vote that he's putting up. That we had 4 wins there. We had we had only 13 moral victories. Even these are going down. This is where any vote gets at least 30% support, which I'm advocating that should be a win. That companies should be listening to any vote that gets 30% or more. We had the biggest shareholder disconnect this year. I'm going to call this the biggest this week. The biggest two-screen shareholder group has got to be at Otis Worldwide, where 61% of the vote said no on pay. That's an extraordinarily high vote, and yet the lowest director vote was 93% in support, and the average support of all directors at Otis Worldwide was 98% support. Said yes. So I don't. That makes absolutely. I mean, what? How? What?
They
how?
also 40% of investors demanded that Otis Worldwide disclose political contributions. So clearly, investors targeted Otis Worldwide do not like what they're doing and loved every single director.
Sorry, I didn't put that in the script to laugh there. That was a genuine laugh. Again, with the directors, I maybe at about 10 companies that I even count where any directors had above 20% of the vote against, but only one overall, Matt, is voted out. Although I didn't check their policies to see if this director will actually leave, but that's Thurman John Rogers at Enphase Energy. Now that was a classified board vote, so only 2 directors were up for vote, but he got a 61% vote against. I looked at the proxy. I actually don't even really know why. I'm seeing a lot more of these votes. We have a great listener who chimes in when I scratch my head over some of these votes. So if anyone has any insight on Enphase Energy, reach out. But I didn't see a retirement policy. I didn't see there wasn't a strong vote against pay, even though he's on the compensation committee. He did have some kind of some small related party transactions with a new company that he's a CEO of, but only about $300,000 worth of transactions. So
it's a
maybe
plurality
that's it.
vote.
It's a plurality vote. So he will not.
So he's still
he'll stay on the
elected.
board. But anyway, that's the only major vote against. And finally, let me wrap up this week on the votes because there's really not much to report, unfortunately. One strange. First of all, we're seeing more dissent against the auditor. I've reported on this week to week. 4 companies this week with at least 10% vote against the auditor. Definitely a growing trend this year. I have no idea why. And finally, this funny one at Akame Technologies. So I've been reporting about this kind of dirty trick that companies have been using this year, where John Chevedden puts up a vote asking for the ability of 10% of shareholders to call a special meeting. And what management does is put up their own vote for 25% of shareholders to call a special meeting, which is basically impossible. You're not going to get, it's hard enough to get 10% of shareholders agreeing on anything, but 25%, it's just not going to happen. So they did this at Align Technology as an example, where management got 65% support and John only got 17% of the support. So they beat him there. But at Akamai Technologies, Matt, this one was super close. I don't know what the company's going to do. A majority, 51% supported John Chevedden's proposal for 10% to call a special meeting, and 52% supported the management proposal. There's only a difference in about 1 million votes out of like 60 million yes votes. So how does the company handle this one? They can't give this a victory to the management on this one.
No, but they both passed. So doesn't that mean both 10% and 25% of investors can call a shareholder meeting?
I don't know. But you blew your own game at Akamai. You screwed up. I mean, I don't know. Anyway, that's the most interesting vote of the week. That's all I got. Matt?
That was a lot.
It was? Okay. I felt like I had more last week, so I'm feeling I still have some energy left in me. Let's move over to the big vote, where Matt and I have kind of been poking at this bear all week. The Wall Street Journal released a report on the top 250 board directors. I think we hinted at this at the show, our Tuesday show on Business Pants. But Matt, I know you took a absurdly deep dive into this. So what do you have? What's your reporting on this list? The methodology, the directors. What do you got?
First, I report that I went way too deep into this list.
This is great. I love this.
So this is what the Wall Street Journal said about it. It was done by Bendable Labs with input from a number of third-party data providers.
Free Float? Was Free Float in there?
Free Float was not in there.
S-Gage, our former sponsor.
S-Gage, our former sponsor,
our data
was
partner,
in there.
right?
Diligent was in there. A friend of the show, Doug Cha, actually advised on this. So we know some of the data, and we know some of the people who were involved. Bendable Labs put it together. I don't know them, but I actually reached out to them afterwards.
Okay.
This is what they said in the Wall Street Journal. It said that the list is, quote, the 250 most influential and effective corporate directors set to serve on S&P 500 boards through 2025. So influential and effective were
and
not
effective.
Defined.
Okay, I was going to say that because we actually have an indicator, influencer indicator, right?
We have a direct measure of sort of influence or responsibility on a board. That's actually a metric that we produce.
Yeah.
They didn't define influential or effective.
Or effective. Okay, yeah.
So, but they sort of hinted at it in the methodology. The methodology is a point-based system. Mm-hmm. And they give points for individual attributes like sitting on committees or the roles that you have, right? That I assume is the influential part. Okay. The company performance, which I assume is the effective part. And then they give a bonus for a person that sits on multiple boards at large companies, right? Like then there's just a bonus for that. This is where it got random really quickly for me because the point system, the maximum number of points that any director could hypothetically get is 23.25 points. Okay. I don't know why 23.25. I don't know why it's not normalized in some way. It seemed very designed for an outcome rather than designed for a narrative, right? Like it didn't seem to be solved. I'm not sure what it solved. In fact, you could get 10 points for company performance, 7.25 points for individual, and you could get, reasonably 6 points for, being on lots of boards. So it was pretty random about that. But the important thing to note here is even though the biggest portion of the points could come from company performance. Right. No director's biggest portion of points came from company performance. Not one director was winning in the top 100 for outperforming on company performance.
So then the I guess the effective part of this is really not what they're measuring.
Don't know. There's a hint of effective without any effectiveness.
Okay.
They really valued things like being lead independent director over anything else. So it was not an outcome based list.
So it sounds more like a measurement of their board roles.
It's assigning how point many values roles do you have on how many boards are you on, right?
Right. Despite the fact that there is a kind of an uncomfortable point where directors will be voted out if they have too many board roles, right?
Right, which is they don't dock a director from having multiple, too many board roles.
Yeah.
There's just sort of a built-in system in which directors don't really take more than 4 at the large cap companies.
Okay.
You get occasional 5s, but not really. But at a minimum, the list was good in order to induce me to think about how would you rank best directors? What is a winning director?
Okay.
And I would propose that a winning director is one that pays the CEO the least amount of money for the highest TSR and the fewest controversies possible. Sustainable returns, no controversy, least amount of money to the CEO.
Which is really a win not only for shareholders, but it's all for shareholder value. It's also a win for stakeholders, really. I mean, we see a lot more coverage about CEOs with high pay ratios. Yeah.
The reality about what you see out of directors is they're meant to play defense, right? They're meant to protect your asset. If you're electing them to protect your asset, navigate the future, deliver sustainable returns, and save you as much money as possible. So. But here's the top 100. Here's some standouts.
Okay.
I just pulled a couple of thoughts from it. And the number one director in the S&P 500.
This is exciting. Yeah. If I could play a drum roll, I would. But yeah, go ahead.
Number one.
Yes.
Top director. This is the Michael Jordan of directors.
Love it.
This is Shea Gilgeous-Alexander of directors right now.
Yeah.
Is Ed Phillip of United Airlines.
Okay. Ed Phillip.
Which is arguably the biggest letdown for a number one, maybe of all number ones ever. He's on two boards in our database.
That's it.
One of which is the totalitarian company in Canada, where he sits on the board. He's not even.
But is this list from Wall Street Journal even covering Canadian boards? Are
they
we clear
excluded
about
that board. They only listed the United Airlines board. He has 8 years of tenure at United Airlines.
This is a letdown.
He's the nom chair, but I don't even know. His performance is fine. He bats 600 overall. He's slightly below average on TSR, but about average on everything else. It's the most average choice ever. It's like the outcome suggests that all you have to do is show up for 8 years, and you'll be arguably one of the top directors in the S&P 500.
I'm a little confused here. You mentioned there's an accumulation of points. Now they are only counting him from one board, and somehow he is the number one.
He's technically on two boards, right?
But not according to them, I thought you said.
Well, they'd only list the one board, but they count both boards.
Oh, okay.
He's the nom committee chair on both boards, so he's getting some chair roles for that, right? Like,
sure.
I don't get it. I'm not going to lie.
This is a weird one.
It's very weird for a number one. It's like he's the least worst director, and they put him at number one.
I have a theory about this actually, which you probably won't appreciate. And I know a lot of news organizations do listen to our shows. They don't give us credit for a lot of ideas. But one of the things I've been trotting out for the last few years is that I take a special interest in directors who have more than one first name. Right? No, you're laughing.
I know.
But this guy is named Edward Michael Phillip. This guy has three very manly,
he wasn't happy
waspy first names. Maybe they got confused by my joking, and maybe they gave him some points just because he's Ed, Mike, Phil. This is just a great name.
Well, the thing I did was I need to know, like, where does Ed Phillip even show up in our data, right? Like,
we've never talked about him actually.
So I filtered U.S. large cap directors who bat more than 500. 500 is the average director on any given performance metric, who are above 500 on TSR and earnings, meaning their companies actually deliver returns for shareholders. They're on more than two boards, and none of them are totalitarian. That is not a deep list. Like, I didn't do like a deep dive into what added knowledge do they get, like any of that. And then I ranked the directors by overall performance. There are 144 directors before I get to the first person from the top 100 list.
Oh, really?
And the first person that shows up in our list is Kevin Kennedy, who ranks number 7 on the top 100 list.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't. I couldn't recreate it with our data.
I will say this to the Wall Street Journal and Bendable Labs is that you really should have reached out to us or to the data, at least at freeflowanalytics.com. It's the world leader in performance data for directors. And because I will say this about Edward Michael Phillip, which is interesting and which really demonstrates the power of the data at freeflowanalytics.com and at FreeFlow, is that the data actually supports that and no one else would have data like this or does have data like this. Edward Michael Phillip is actually more powerful on that board, according to the data, than the CEO of United Airlines, correct. Scott Kirby.
That is correct.
Which shows you the power of this influence data that we have that the Wall Street Journal doesn't have. But anyway, keep going, Matt.
But the point system here is definitely a liability for investors. This is not an investor-focused ranking. It is I don't know like who the core audience is because
it's a media friendly ranking, right? It's like it's a fun piece to read.
I don't even know
maybe?
because like the names are not big names in
That's
directorships, right?
It's not like Ron Sugar at Apple or someone like that.
Exactly. Like John Koraleski, who's number 26, got all of his points from sitting on committees and only debits for performance. Like it was negative numbers for company performance. And he's somehow number 26 out of 250 directors they reviewed, despite getting negative numbers for performance. In fact, 29 of the top 100 underperformed on the company metrics according to this
That's
own
not
point system.
good. Yeah.
29% of the top 100 underperform. Their companies underperform. Monica Lozano, despite getting the performance of Apple, 59% of her points. She was in 28th place. 59% of her points came simply because she sits on 4 boards.
Right. That's what's awkward about this list. I mean, and speaking of like the oddity of Edward Michael Phillips being at the top, I would have expected names. You mentioned Apple, like Tim Cook, who's not only on the Apple board, on the Nike board.
It was all
right?
non-executives, right?
Oh,
it's non-executives.
Non-executives.
But I would have expected a Ron Sugar. I would have expected some, like there are names that appear or that in our lists that make a lot more sense in some ways than these. Out of the top 100, here are the things that struck me overall. They're dictator friendly. 27 of the top 100 sit on at least one totalitarian board. At least one. So that's the Ed Phillips effect, right?
Well,
like you got 2 boards, but one of them is run by, all the influence is actually owned by someone else.
I'll tell you, that's what the free flow data does the best. I mentioned in the top stories of the week, paychecks, where Thomas Golisano stepped down. When you look at the board in the database on the platform, freeflowanalytics.com, you can see immediately the power of Tom Golisano on that board. And you can see that you can't consider every other director on that board to be 1/10 of the power, right? The influence number really helps you understand that at these dictatorships, the directors effectively have no power. Right?
That's right. They're sort of elected puppets. What they got right was they did choose generally highly influential directors, not the highest,
because they're counting the amount of committees they sit on, and they're
in part the average max influence of these directors in the top 100 was 13%. Right, like that's a decent number. That's a decent number.
Anything over 10 is decent. Yeah.
The single most influential board member in the top 100 is Tom Solis of Mettler Toledo, he's ranked 64th on the list, but he is the most influential on the board that he's on overall. Most of them are long tenured. 21 of them have more than 11 years tenure at one of their boards. They wouldn't be considered independent at all in the UK, right? Like the methodology focuses on they called it the sweet spot, which is between 5 and 11 years of tenure.
I don't understand that. Yeah, I noticed that.
I don't know that there's any academic evidence that says being on a board between 5 and 11 years is great for the company. Yeah. Like or great for shareholders or great for anything, right? There's not much emphasis on these people's resumes. Like only 15% have advanced degrees. Only 11% went to elite schools. 35% have been CEOs somewhere, right? Like at some company. However, 74% of the list was white and 50% of them were white men. Just to give you a benchmark for that, only 40% of U.S. large cap companies, the directors are white men. So there's more white men on the top 100 than there are at U.S. large caps on average.
Which would suggest something that we see quite often, which is that you can have women on the board, but they're not put in leadership roles nearly often enough. Right?
And which eventually excludes them from being on multiple boards or having long tenured roles.
And also diminishes their influencer percentages.
But the group is a highly networked bunch. Like there, in fact, when I look at the merit metrics that we have, right? Only half of them have core industry knowledge on the boards where they sit. 82% of them, though, were a CEO, a chair, or a lead independent director, right?
Makes sense, yeah.
72% of them are highly networked to the boards that they sit on.
I was going to say, it sounds like we're celebrating the brotherhood of directors, of corporate directors. That's what this list is doing.
That is ultimately what I got out of it. Only 44% overall had paper merit, according to our data, which means more than half of them do not have merit on paper. Their backgrounds are mostly in manufacturing and finance. 54% come from have machinery or mechanical skills, according to our data.
Yeah.
And 39% have finance backgrounds, economics and finance.
But I wonder what about the thing about manufacturing? Yeah.
Out of the top 100, only 2 directors in our knowledge database had engineering and technology as one of their core skills. Only
How's that possible?
2. I don't know. Like especially given the rise of, technology and AI, only 2 of the top 250 directors have that as like something in their background that we can point to and say where it came from.
I mean, if you think of the S&P 500 in general and how much of the market cap is allotted to those type of companies, you'd think that there would be much more power at the directorships at those companies, right?
That's the most sought out kind of director, right? Like, technology firms, AI background, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's bizarre, yeah.
But more than anything, the biggest number that stood out was out of 100 directors here that I looked at. I did not look at the full 250. I looked at the top 100. The 100 had 3,828 connection loops back to their own boards.
Oh, wow.
On average, 40 loops per person. In fact, the vast majority of those loops went through just 2 firms, and they're not companies. It is the Partnership for New York City and the Business Roundtable. That is the breeding ground.
So,
these are people who sit on nonprofit or trade groups.
So it sounds like these are not necessarily the most influential or effective corporations. These are just the most connected, maybe? Maybe that's how the list should read, the most networked,
it's more like the most professional directors.
Most professional.
Right?
These are the dudes that you see when you open a book of directors. You'll see these dudes.
Right.
Yeah.
Except for Ed Phillip, who I don't even know what would make my top 300 list, right?
It's a little odd, that one.
But you do have the opportunity this week in particular. There are a lot of big votes coming up this week, right?
Okay.
Meta comes up this week. Chevron's up this week. Exxon's up this week. There are actually a number of these directors that you can vote on this week, and this is where it gets. This is where it gets crazy.
From this top 250 list. I love it.
250 list. Yeah. The top 100 is what I looked at. Really.
Sure.
So at Exxon, you have Jay Hooley, who's coming up. At Lowe's, you have Marvin Ellison. Marvin Ellison, long time, highly influential figure.
He's on every board, I feel
He's on lots of boards.
Yeah.
And he's the CEO of Lowe's. Merck, 2 directors.
Nice.
At Merck, Tom Glosser and Pamela Craig.
Okay.
And this is where it gets crazy. This profile, this top 250 directors came out on Monday or Tuesday, right? Mm-hmm. And these votes were set up months ago. But now you have Chevron, where 4 directors in just the top 100 sit on the Chevron board.
That's why I find the list kind of a head scratcher in general, right? Is that so? They're saying that Chevron has 4 influential
4 of the top 100, the most effective and influential directors sit on Chevron.
So you got to wonder from their perspective, does that make for a difficult boardroom if you have 4 loud, influential voices?
Imagine it the other way. Wouldn't you say that this is one of the most effective boards ever?
I suppose, yes.
Would anybody pick Chevron as one of the most effective boards in the United States?
No.
And I'm burying the lead right now because Allstate has 6 directors from the top 100 up for vote this week.
So Allstate must be one of the best companies in the world, then.
On Earth, right? I mean, like that's the majority
more than
of
NVIDIA,
Allstate's
more than
board.
Apple, more than anything.
So one of 2 things are happening.
Yeah.
Either Allstate has one of the greatest boards, or the way the list is constructed is so biased towards a particular type of company director. That Allstate really is just a really super connected insular board.
They had 6% of the top 100. Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah.
And I wanted to give you a few targets out of the top 100 to vote out.
Okay.
Right?
I like this.
Because the top 100 does not, it may purport to be like effective and influential directors, but it does not actually say that is serving shareholders.
Yeah, I was going to say, right. Mm-hmm.
So the ones I targeted here are Donald Brown, Andrea Redmond, and Kermit Crawford are all on the All-State board.
Wow.
All three. And they all failed to deliver even 400 in TSR across multiple boards and multiple years.
That's a pretty bad batting average there, yeah.
They're below average in giving you a shareholder return. And they're all three on this board. I think you've got more than enough effective and influential directors. You could vote out half of them and not even blink.
Sure.
Deborah Reed Clages.
Okay.
I don't know how to say her last name. So apologies, Deborah. She is the most connected to her board. 42% of the Chevron board has a connection somehow to Deborah. And Wanda Austin, also on the Chevron board, has the most powerful network of people. She's on a lot of different boards. These are two people that if you voted them off Chevron, you might actually stop with some of the insular behavior at these boards, and you could start putting more independence on the boards.
Yeah, I was going to say here is one thing that this list seems to be celebrating, although I don't think I don't know anyone should be celebrating this, is that what we found with a lot of directors who are women or people of color is that they are overboarded, meaning that back when there was a push to add people of color and women to boards, the corporate world kind of fixated on a small handful of them, even though the data would suggest there's a lot more qualified people out there. And then they run them onto multiple boards. Like Wanda Austin, for example, is on Amgen. She's on Apple. She's on Chevron. Yes. Deborah, you also put out Deborah Reed Clages. She's on Lockheed Martin. She's on Caterpillar. She's on Chevron. I mean, we're seeing this overboarded pattern, which most of the governance world is against, and yet this list seems to be celebrating that, right?
And not only does it seem like it's celebrating it, it actually is utterly ignoring the fact that the implications of this are you have a board full of people that all know each other, right? Like that's the inevitable end state. The last one I want to point out for a vote out, and if there's any strong vote out this week on the major 10 billion plus companies coming up for a vote this week, it would be Hooley at Exxon. Hooley came from State Street. He's ranked number 79th on the top 100 list. Joe Hooley. He's one of the people who sued Arjuna Capital. They're shareholder suers.
Yeah.
And he ran State Street, a shareholder. If there's anybody who's sort of more hypocritical about their position about what a shareholder right should be, State Street is one of the biggest voters. And he was okay suing a shareholder. I think that's an easy vote out. That clearly did not factor in to the most 250 effective directors.
I was going to add to that. He also has one of the lowest controversies batting averages I've ever really seen for a director. It's like point basically 0.006 or whatever. It's just super low. Yeah.
And I wanted to do a quick addendum here since I'm talking about Exxon.
Go ahead.
Exxon, this is the first time in 25 years there's no shareholder proposals at Exxon.
And this is the trend this proxy season, right? Companies with no shareholder proposals.
It's a massive chill. In fact, all the people that would have put in shareholder proposals are now worried that Exxon's going to sue them. Exxon won. They won the battle because they got Arjuna to say, we'll never put in a shareholder proposal again, which is unbelievable cowering. But I get it. Like, you can't fight the legal department at Exxon. They have more money than you. But to say you'd never do it again, that's your shareholder right. You didn't do anything wrong. You did something that you have a legal right to do, and you still cowered and gave up. And now all of the normal proponents are avoiding Exxon like the plague. And the result is you have nothing to vote on except directors. So my suggestion is vote on the directors.
Of course.
This is the moment.
Yes.
You don't like feeling the chill of Exxon and thinking that it's okay for them to sue a shareholder of any kind. It doesn't matter if you agree with the shareholder proposal or not. The point of the proposal is you can vote against the proposal.
Of course.
But the directors okayed a vote against their own shareholder.
Right.
suing their own shareholder, despite the fact that there are channels to deal with that at the SEC. They did not like the outcome. They decided to actually take it to courts and circumvent fighting it through the SEC the normal way.
Yeah, and and again against two entities that that definitely did not have a legal team or the resources for a protracted fight against Exxon. I mean, the whole thing is a farce.
So I already mentioned Hooley's an easy vote.
Yeah,
against,
who else would you target
right?
at Exxon?
Two others, right? Jeff Ubben. He's from Value Act. He was actually added to the board after the Engine Number 1 victory as part of the dilution of Engine Number 1 directors. He has been called an ESG proponent when he was added to the board. He was called an ESG proponent. And on all the boards he's been on in our database, he bats 371 on carbon. He's the worst performer on carbon on this board. He bats 250 on TSR and 301 on earnings. He's the worst overall on this board. He's been there since 2001. He's had 4 years. It's not getting better. In fact, Exxon is reversing course on its carbon targets. They're rolling things back. They're making efforts to basically do nothing. If to the extent they can. He's arguably the first carbon no vote that you could take. If you're Arjuna Capital, you still own those shares. If you're As You Sow, you still own those shares. If you're one of the proponents that owns shares that would have voted for a carbon proposal, make this a no vote against a director. This is your opportunity to vote no on a director. You don't have to engage. You look strictly at the data and say, who's the worst carbon performer on this board? And it happens to be Jeff Ubben. That's carbon intensity performance, right? And the second one, or the third one really, is Larry Kellner. Okay. If you don't know Larry Kellner's name, he's Larry Kellner of Boeing fame. He underperforms everywhere. It doesn't matter what board he's been on. I don't know how he is a continuing director at so many places, but for the first time ever, I actually did a study on honor of the United States losing its AAA credit rating status. I did a study of all directors who've sat on corporate boards where the credit rating was downgraded during their tenure. And I looked at this in the last 7 to 10 years. And Larry Kellner is one of the worst. The worst was, there were directors this happened more than 30 times to in their careers. Larry Kellner saw credit ratings at every board he sat on drop 26 times in his tenure. 26 times in 7 years, he saw a credit rating from S&P drop. If you need another reason to vote out Larry Kellner, I don't know what it is. Like, the credit rating agencies are not biased towards anything except debt and financials. And this is a person who sits on boards where continually credit ratings drop. That's like pure performance metrics. I think it's time. So that's my take on the top 250 Wall Street Journal and a little addendum on Exxon.
And if anyone from the Wall Street Journal is listening, or maybe you know someone from the Wall Street Journal who let them know about this show, please, and reach out to us. We'd love to have you on and talk about this list.
Worth saying that good for somebody at the Wall Street Journal saying let's explore directors. These people actually matter. I mean, I don't have to agree with the methodology. There are points in it that were good, and then I don't have to agree overall. It's great to actually have something as a starting point.
For any listener who is listening to this, who thinks that we are a bit caustic, a bit negative at times, a bit cynical, that you're missing kind of one of the bigger points of the company, which is that we wanted to start a company that borrowed from sports media, which is, let's just talk about this. Let's talk about these people. Let's talk about directors. Let's talk about CEOs. We have our own methodology. We have our own quantitative data. We're not suggesting it is the only way of looking at things, but let's just talk about these issues because we think they're important. We think that investors, consumers need to know who is making the decisions on these boards. So to your point, Matt, this is not to say that the Wall Street Journal has bungled their list. We actually love the list. We love talking about it. We love arguing about it. So yeah, you're missing the point if we think we're saying the list sucks. That's not what we're saying.
No. I would like to say the list sucks because
we say everything sucks. Yeah,
in that
we're
Stephen
from Gen
A.
X.
Smith way, but I'm not going to. Yeah.
All right. Well, anything else, Matt? Because that was plenty.
That was more than enough.
More than enough. That's the Proxy Countdown for the week of May 19th, 2025. Join us next week when we jump back into the alternative democracy pool. Forever on the lookout for shareholder shenanigans, dopey directors, scandalous CEO pay ratios, and wayward band-aids. Maybe from some of the top 100 directors in the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah, they get cut a lot.
Yeah, they do.